So while this is the only organization in the whole world, as I know, all the United States run by students in the field of international business. So let's give those kids a clap. Now to the program. I'm no expert on what they're going to cover, but I can tell you what I anticipate they're going to cover is the most important to you if you are going to look for exporting or beyond exporting other forms of market entry into a world that has increased its middle class consumption power by over 50% for the last 5 years. And it's China, India, and Brazil. That is your program.
On behalf of Grant Thornton, I just wanted to welcome you tonight, and I trust you enjoyed the cocktail hour, as Carmen refers to it, I believe...
Which you pay. Which you sponsor.
Oh yeah, well we sponsor, yeah. And I think we have an interesting program, an informative program this evening. I trust you'll enjoy it. I'm not going to introduce everybody here that's with Grant Thornton. I do not have a list, so I would forget someone. I'm just going to ask them all to stand, and hopefully you'll get a chance to meet some of the people here tonight, other than the speakers. But the other individuals from Grant Thornton, could you just stand up just for a second? So hopefully you've got a chance to maybe meet some of these. And they're all basically all from the Wichita office. There's a couple from the Kansas City office. So I know I had several people ask me tonight if I was speaking, and fortunately I'm not. So the only task I have is I'm going to introduce the moderator for tonight's panel, who will then introduce the other speakers. Dan Powers is the managing partner of the Wichita office here in Wichita. He's been here about 1.5 years, and prior to coming to Wichita, he spent 2 years in Bangalore, India, helping set up our shared service center there. So he has some international experience recently. Prior to that, he spent 8 years in our Kansas City office. He was head of our tax department there. And prior to that, he spent 20 years in Atlanta. He's a graduate of Florida University, where he got his master's and his Bachelor of Science there with an emphasis in taxation. He's actually a tax partner, and he's not being a managing partner. So he's integrated himself very well in the Wichita community over the last 1.5 years that he's been here. He's on the board of the Wichita Children's Home, the Boys and Girls Club of South Central Kansas, and various other civic organizations I know he's already deeply involved with. So I give a warm welcome to Dan, and he'll introduce and take you through the program tonight. So.
Dan's just relieved because now he can go drink that glass of wine that he's been waiting for. So, let me introduce you to our esteemed panel. This is, I think, a great panel because each of them are representing the region that we're talking about. So to my right is Sandy Chu. She's a partner and she's the national leader of our China Business Group. She's based in New York City and has advised many multinational companies on numerous Chinese tax and business issues, including cross-border transactions and market entry investment strategies. She's a fellow member of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants in the UK and the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And she received her Bachelor of Arts in Accounting and Finance from the University of North London in the UK. So Sandy Chu. And to her right is Karina Roiuk-Yu, who is a senior manager also in our New York City office and a member of our Latin America Business Group. She has over 17 years experience, I know she looks much younger, providing tax services for public and private companies, doing business in Brazil. Karina is actually a member of the Bar Association in Sao Paulo, and she received her law degree from the Catholic University. She can give you the full name, in Brazil. But she also has her LLM that she got from New York University. So welcome, Karina. To her right is Vikram Devanga, who is a director in our transaction advisory services. He's also in the New York area with over 10 years of public accounting experience. He's worked 2 years. He worked 2 years in our Grant Thornton India Assurance and Advisory Service Group, where he performed audits and SOX testing for public and private companies. In addition to working the 2 years in Mumbai, Vikram also did a secondment to London. He's a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and received his Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Mumbai. So, welcome. So we put together, a series of questions, and again, there's interesting things that are happening in Brazil, China, and India. And so these questions are intending to ferret out some of what's going on, but we also want to make sure that we've got time at the end to answer any questions that you may have that maybe the panelists didn't have a chance to cover. So I'll start with the softball question, which is, what's the current environment? Whether it's business, political, environment, and how is it impacting business investment? For example, Sandy, China, right? We were talking today, slowest growth in 2015 in a quarter of a century. Third quarter debt rose to somewhere between 50 and 250% of GDP. We talked today also about the GDP setting that the government is issuing. 2015 they missed their mark. I think President Xi has actually said that 6.5 is the target for 2016. What do you think about the current environment in China?
Dan, you said it all.
I said too much, sorry. I'm supposed to be a moderator, I'm not on the panel. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome. I don't know where to begin. China, without me telling you tonight, if you read from CNN, any channels, newspapers, a lot of things happening in China. People saying China is going to be in a huge problem, going to have a hard landing, and it's going to be going into another financial crisis, recessions, and that's what we've been saying in the Western newspapers, medias. But what I'm looking also in the Chinese language in China saying the Chinese people, the government, the people there, China is going through a unprecedented situation. It's undergoing a transformation from a investment manufacturing powerhouse into a high-end service, and a consumer-based market. So China obviously, if you look at the GDP rate, is the envy of many economies in the world who have 10% year on year, who have 6%, 7% GDP for the last 10 years. Now, China is an emerging market. There's still a lot to build, a lot to learn. And the sentiment in China from the government official message is that China, it is in crisis at the moment, but it's not going to be hard landing, and it's not going to be crashing down, but it will be slowed down. It will be slowing down. And based on all the FDI, inbound and outbound statistics, the trade surplus, all the data, including monetary, fiscal policies, and statistics, pointing to what China is slowing down, but it's still going to be maintained with the targeting of 6.5% GDP in 2016. Now, that is still very high to many other economies in the world. Now, people will say, well, is it really 6.5? But if China set a target of 6.5, China would deliver it. Now, China did not deliver it this time, 25, but only missed 0.1%. Now, which economy able to deliver that? So, more details to come, then, as we go on with your question list, but I think I will leave it here at the moment.
Well, good. I'm glad I left at least a little something to say there, Sandy. So, well, let's go on to you, Karina. Here we have the longest recession in a century. the biggest bribery scandal, I think, in history, and probably the most unpopular leader, at least in living memory. What's going on in Brazil?
Well, it's hard to explain what's going on in Brazil because the country has a history of political problems, economical problems, but this time it's completely different from all the past years. The entire Latin America has been through a crisis, especially the Atlantic side of the Latin America, Brazil and Argentina. The Pacific side is doing pretty good. And Brazil specifically, the government was the main shareholder of this big oil company in Brazil, Petrobras. And this company has been profitable for many, many years, and then recently this corruption scandal and everything, and the popularity of the government after the beginning of this scandal went down. Brazil is, let's say, in this deep crisis, not only because of this situation. Brazil is a country based on commodities. We export commodities. That's how the economy in Brazil works, and the international price is very, very low, so it's not helping at all. And when you put all together the corruption scandal, the problems with the government, not only the president, I would say the entire party and the ministers and, well, the government in general, and the international price of commodities are contributing somehow to aggravate the crisis.
I wouldn't think these were the sort of signs that Brazil was looking for in its, 2016 Olympic glory year.
Well,
Yeah, I guess that was a comment, not a question. Sorry. I know, I'm the moderator. I will try to watch myself. So,
Another wine.
yeah, I haven't had any wine. That's the really funny thing. So, what about Rousseff? Dilma Rousseff, do you think she'll survive this? There's a lot of talk about her being impeached.
yeah, there's a lot of talk about impeachment, and there's, as far as I know, there's at least 2 lawsuits against her and trying to move this process on. But to be honest, there's no one to replace her in case she's impeached, because the vice president will not make anything better. And the same for the Senate and the House presidents. So I don't think, particularly, and after talking to many colleagues that are based in Brazil, we don't think that impeachment is going to be a solution at this. And she's been there for the second term for a year, so she has 3 years to go. I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay, and you can, eventually we're going to get to talk about what are the opportunities. And right now we're just getting a little bit of the background. Let's go a little bit more optimistic. We've got a new Modi government. If there's one country in the world that's really going to benefit from a lower oil price, it's going to be India, since it has to import essentially all of its energy. In fact, I was reading the Economist magazine paper yesterday, and there was a "Make It in India" ad. So they're trying to encourage people to come in and manufacture in India. So why don't you give us a little bit more insight about the environment in India?
Sure. The one significant political change that's happened in India, which took almost 3 decades, is that we had, for the first time after 30 years, one political party that got a largest majority. You guys perhaps are not so used to it. You guys are used to seeing either a Republican or a Democrat coming in, and then when a Michael Bloomberg comes in the picture and comes in as an independent, you guys are wondering, why doesn't he take one side? Like, why is he not either a Republican or a Democrat? We've got 6 sides in India. There are 6 national parties. So imagine that struggle. I think the biggest challenge that we've had historically, because of these regional parties that had such a big say, is that one national party couldn't go ahead and fulfill its national agenda. There were regional agendas which everyone had to have some say in, and therefore the national agenda was kind of slightly missed out on. The biggest advantage with the Modi party this year is that they got the single largest majority. They're able to come to power. And he has a proven track record. Before being a Prime Minister of India, he was a Chief Minister in Gujarat. He did wonders for that state. It's one of the most progressive states in India. And also just his election campaign when he came into the foray was very unique. He was addressing his campaigning message to the youth. He had a lot of tech-savvy way of reaching out to the people. So overall, I think the outreach was positive. The feeling was very positive about him coming in. And I think Make in India is one of the several programs he's started, and I think it's gaining some momentum.
Yeah, you might be heard. So, what about the Clean India campaign? Because that's obviously something that a Westerner, kind of gets slapped in the face when they first land in India. Is it's definitely not. You're not in Kansas anymore. So, but Modi is actually trying to do something to try to improve that.
Yeah, and that's because 70% of India's population really resides in the rural area. And I don't know if you guys would struggle to believe this, but there are a lot of households in rural India that don't even have their individual household toilets. So one of the missions that Modi has is, as he considers Mahatma Gandhi as one of his mentors, it was Mahatma Gandhi's dream to have India to be a very hygienic and a clean country. So Modi wants that for Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birthday, which is in October 2019, he wants to be in a position to have India get there, as close to getting there as possible. There's a $10 billion budget that is set aside to basically help this cause, essentially to build about 10 million household toilets, about 500,000 public toilets, and even for the cities, not to leave alone the cities because we've got several problems even in the big cities, even to develop the solid waste management processes. A lot of funds have been set aside, so that's another initiative, I think, just from the physical side, to create an impression for investors and foreign nationals.
I suspect that Modi wasn't all that happy when the World Health Organization named Delhi as the dirtiest big city in the world.
No.
We know Beijing gets a lot of press for its smog, but the air particulates in Delhi are actually twice as much as Beijing.
That's right. I think it's gradually changing. They're trying to now have more LNG kind of utility buses. The public transport have essentially almost 100% shifted to LNG. It's changing, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. So do you think the diesel subsidies, where diesel was kind of kept at an artificially low price, theoretically to help the farmers in the rural sections, but where it used to be 1 in 20 vehicles was diesel, those subsidies then 1 in 2 cars were diesel, and I think diesel pollutes a lot more.
That's absolutely right, and especially for these larger vehicles, I think that was one of the causes. Delhi has been notorious for that, so I think this transition to LNG is a shift to the positive.
All right, well, we talked about the smog in Beijing. I know a lot of expats are really kind of concerned about that.
Right. It is a very serious situation, particularly this time of the year. The winter is here. Everybody turn up in burn coat. So what happened is that the most serious situation is more in the northern part of China. And a number of red alerts has been issued in certain parts of the northern part of China. And the reason of that is a number of reasons. One is really China didn't really have a plan of emission control, enforcement measurements, the skill sets and the knowledge to plan ahead. Well, after all, China was, was and start now still an emerging market. So a lot of things still to be materialized. One thing is the real estate market because of the, if you hear that a lot, is about 10 years ago started talking about what is national bird of China, is the crane that building. Because if you look around in China, you don't see the real birds, you see the cranes. Those are the national bird of China. Now, that didn't help because of digging, the torn down of the old houses, in the roads, start up all this pollution from ground up and building. I mean, that's what really gave a huge push to the Chinese market today. The wealth created as a result. And the second cause major factor is really the manufacturing. Now, I talk about China has been trying to shift from a manufacturing powerhouse to a consumer-based market. Now, the cause of that is the pollution. Everybody, what we wear, I challenge you, you must have one item is made in China. Look at your shoes, your socks, your suits, your earrings, your tires,
I
your
was just going to pull out
iPhone.
my iPhone. Thank
Yes,
you.
iPad.
Yeah. Apparently my earring, okay.
Maybe some of the your earrings? Oh. So imagine that every day we're living here in the U.S. make, at least, heavy elements that have happened in China, make and ship from China. So because of obviously everybody know about the low-cost laboring market there. So that was what caused everybody, causing that manufacturing. If you go to any part of China, the local government would let you set up a manufacturing company and you produce there. It could be very well in the middle of Manhattan, on a relative sense in China, in Shanghai, in the middle of Shanghai, in the middle of Beijing, 10, 15 years ago, they let you have a manufacturing plant there without thinking about would it produce pollution? Would the waste gonna damage the environment? Would the emissions gonna be exceeded the standard? None of this was the alarm or on the table. So now, up to this day, China realized that with the smoke and all that, really how hesitant issue, a huge issue. China is well aware of that. So China have done a number of things, right? One is if there's any international important meetings to be held in Beijing, and they will send notice to the major manufacturing plant to shut down their plants. They're no longer in production for that period of time. And the other thing is they control the cars going to Beijing, depending on your number plate. The odd number will go to certain dates, if your number plate number, and then the other number plate number in a even number will go to other dates to control the traffic pollution. And then they will also, will, besides that, is control the traffic coming in the city overall, and the buses of that. And you know what? If they stop the manufacturing plants just for that week, you will see the blue sky right away. It's really that simple. But they cannot shut down the manufacturing plants for any longer, right, for permanent term. So any important meetings, they will do that temporary measures. But for the longer terms, what they are doing, for example, they will relocate relatively more polluted plants into elsewhere. So in China, they start asking companies to relocate. So that's one thing, relocate out of the city area into more inland. Two, they impose much stricter measures on emissions, waste, output pollution. Once you not meet the standard, they will not let you renew the business license. Now, if you know working in China, without the business license, you're not going to operate because everything goes by the business license. So I have a client that they had to relocate because they didn't meet the emission standard. So they were unable to renew the business license, and they have to go for a very creative way to move out of that city completely and go to another city. But the other city will impose the same measure. So, they will have problem of, if they don't meet the standard, the minimum standard. So strictly enforce on the output, the emission pollution standard. And the other thing is they obviously encourage a lot of green energy related type of equipment used in the manufacturing. And obviously they will tighter, strict on getting approval if you are going into manufacturing of certain hazardous and very highly polluted products, or during the production process will produce high pollutions. Then they will control and they will not give you the license or approval to set up. So a number of powers being introduced for almost 8 years now. But every time they introduce more and more tighten, this is really one top priority on the agenda that need to be improved and need to be contained.
Well, Karina, let's go back to Brazil. You mentioned that Brazil is a commodity exporting economy. I think one of the banks there came up with an index that said that the commodity value has decreased 41% since the high in 2011. We already talked about the bribery scandal. We talked about inflation that's high. We know that the currency in relation to the dollar is not necessarily going in the right way. And you guys lost the World Cup, right? That is a big deal.
And we lost the game to Germany.
Yeah. That was even
a big
worse.
thing.
Yeah. My son-in-law is from Brazil, so I can appreciate how passionate you are about your football. So is it still attractive? I mean, is Brazil still an attractive market for our audience here to think about investing or doing business with?
The market's still there. So the middle, as you mentioned in the beginning, the middle class, despite the crisis, the middle class can afford more things. So the market, there is a market to invest in Brazil, to sell to Brazil, to be there. However, let's say there's a risk with that, especially in this crisis situation. But I wouldn't say that the currency depreciation, the local currency depreciation, now it's about 4 reais to $1, and it's been 1.2, 1.8 about 2 years ago. It's not that bad. It's cheaper to invest. It's cheaper to ship products to Brazil, so it's something that would attract. And it's a way to make the local industry a little bit more competitive, because the prices, in theory, international prices, in theory, would be better. So the currency depreciation is bad for the tourists, for the Brazilian tourists trying to travel abroad, but for the economy, it's not that bad. Most of the economists, the local economists, say that that's reasonable to be at this rate for Q1. So there is the market. And also, it's a good opportunity if you decide to invest in a country focused on the market and going there. The prices of acquisitions of assets, stocks, they are very accessible. So I would say that yes, there is opportunity. It's good to invest there, but thinking about the risk, I wouldn't say go for it, like step by step, because we estimate that in a couple years, not 2016, but by the end of 2017, things are going to be better.
Come back to it, because I want you to make a recommendation about how you said that joint ventures are not necessarily the way in vogue right now, but maybe you can help share us how companies are investing in it. But first, let's go to Brazil. So we talked about corruption, we talked about currency devaluation, we talked about the lack of commodities. But if somebody says, yes, I really want to go in the Brazilian market, I'm willing to coast through these more difficult times, because I know that when it comes up, it's going to continue to explode. What's the best way to invest in Brazil?
I would say that there's only 2 ways to invest in Brazil. You either buy a local entity, or you start one from zero, from scratch. It depends on your business. Sometimes it's better to make an acquisition, so get a company that's already running in Brazil, and then you can keep the old shareholders for a while, learn about the market, because the same way as in China and India, you can't go to Brazil or any other country in Latin America with the American way of thinking, way of doing business, because it won't work. You have to learn the local practice, how to deal with your customer, how to deal with your client. It's different. Like here, a conference call would work perfectly, so it's fine, half an hour, everything's done. In Brazil, if you don't meet with your client for at least 2 hours for lunch, and then you have a meeting after lunch, you don't talk about anything related to business during lunch. Lunch is a break. Then you go to a meeting, you spend the whole afternoon to get to one point that you have to work your homework, how to do that after. Things work in a different pace than in the US. So it's good to have someone down there that's also familiar with the business. On the other hand, some companies decide to build their manufacturers, their business from scratch. It takes more, it works too, but it takes more time because it's good to have a study to know where you're gonna set your business, depending on the product that you have. The South may not be a good idea. Maybe energy companies would be in the Northeast where it's sunny, it's windy. Some companies prefer the South because of the market. So there must be a study of a location, where to go. Brazil has 26 states. It's not like the US, they're not that independent, so the federal laws would govern everything. But still, you can get some benefits depending on the state that you're going, depending on the type of industry that you have. Some states grant the land, some states exempt you for local taxes for a while, for reduce the VAT. So it's good to have a plan based on your business, and you can also do a joint venture. But in Brazil, we like to be different. In Brazil, a joint venture is not exactly how it is in other countries. You have to be a shareholder of a local entity. So you need to acquire at least 50% of the shares. So you have to be there too. It works, but the divorce may be complicated. And then you have to plan not only how to go, how to invest, you have to plan how, in case you decide to leave the country, it takes at least 5 years. If you decide just to shut down your business, at least 5 years it's gonna take to close your business. So you need to have a plan on how to leave or how to repatriate cash. As I mentioned, dividends are tax exempt, but all other payments, interests, services, royalties, everything is going to be a different, there's going to be a different way to tax those payments. So you need to have clear in mind what type of business you're going to do in Brazil. If it's only a distributor, it's going to be rep office, you're going to be full manufacturer, everything there, and then start planning how to do that.
Well, I appreciate that both you and Sandy, we tend to think of a country and think everybody is the same in the country. So it was good that you kind of compared that, different regions in China definitely have different consumer markets, the same in Brazil. Northern Brazil and southern Brazil, are different, very similar to the way perhaps the north and south are different here. And then we get to India, which again, it has 27 different states, 27 different languages, official languages. You look at a rupee bill in India and it has, I think at least 12 maybe of the 27, numbers written on there. So, how does somebody figure out, okay, how do I set up in Mumbai or Bangalore or Chennai or Calcutta or Delhi?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges, I guess, that you have. And I think like the other panelists have spoken, advanced planning, I guess, is a must. But I guess the additional concerns that have been going on in the recent past in India was around the local sales tax laws, which is essentially to tax a product that has been sold even between states, within states, from one state to another, which just adds to all the additional complexities to the federal tax that's there based purely on income. So like there were not enough complicated laws and tax laws in India, this is just an additional complication to the tax laws. There are several indirect taxes in the form of customs and excise duties. But I guess the positive for that is that, again, this new government promises a few things. One of the things that they've promised is to have a unilateral goods and services tax, which would essentially kind of bring under its umbrella several of the other taxes which had complicated and laws which were very difficult to be interpreted in one particular way. So the GST, as they call it, is likely to come. I guess it's going to take some time, but that will help, I think, a potential investor to understand what the tax structures are, not just in terms of the income tax, but also in terms of VAT and sales tax for intrastate transactions.
Okay. Well, we want to be respectful of everybody's time. We could keep going for probably hours, but we want to make sure that we open it up to any questions that anyone may have on either Brazil, Latin America, India, or China. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes, we have a question.
A quick question for China. Can you comment on, we've all heard through the years the challenges with IP protection in China. Can you comment on the progress that has been made in the country as far as selling technology to China?
Not much. What happened is that it is a huge issue. Chinese government is well aware of this problem, and they know that they need to do more on it. But I tell you, from a policy-making perspective, they have issued more stringent the patent registration, the registration of contract, the licensing, all that. They have strengthened those rules and policies. In practice, if you've been to China, or particularly Shenzhen, you know that that's the hub to get your grade A items. Grade A means that it's the best counterfeit products that you cannot really tell from truth or forced. So what happened is that they are more policing and more undercover going in those places that to catch those selling, for those people selling those counterfeit products. So that is noticeably been happening for the last 10 years or so. That's one thing. So lesser of the counterfeit products being sold in China. On the other hand, more of the patent technology. China is very innovative. They as a country, they encourage innovation. That is the future of China. And that's set up in the National NP Committee as a commitment, as a policy that they're going to go for innovation. That's the future goal. What will happen is that they will encourage Chinese companies, including SOEs, to go outside of China for acquisition of company that with unique IP or advanced technology or knowledge that China don't have. So that's why that policy being opened up for the last 5 years also, that more and more Chinese companies going outbound to acquire companies like in the US. So that way, through the acquisition, becoming their subsidiaries, they learn how to acquire that knowledge in a more proper way. They learn it, the know-how, the technology, and then they can deliver it back to China. That's a huge trend that's been happening on that. So hopefully that's one way to help to sort of like to deal with arguably being accused of stealing IP.
Great question.
What is going to be the impact of China's one-child policy, which has led to the aging of the population? And we see the population graph now, and we see that population of China is getting older, and it's not being replaced by younger population. And in fact, China has a much lower number of young people now, and I think it's going to impact its economic growth. And what is your thought of that?
Great question. You know what? They just relaxed that policy. Now the couple can have the second child.
Yeah, but I think that, but what I'm getting is that, people are now used to having one child, and that's not going to change. that behavior is not going to change very quickly. And I think, you can't just produce 18-year-olds in one day. It takes 18 years to produce 18-year-olds. So it will take a long time to replace that population that was lost over years. I think people are not paying attention to that thing because, when I compare the graph, the population graph, the leaf graph, like countries like US and Western European countries and China. China is looking very similar to Japan and Western European countries now. And I think we need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. China have an aging population, and that's why one of the things that China want the companies to go out of China is to learn about the supply chain in healthcare, all the way from hospital to retirement home to operation recovery facilities, assisted home care, etc. That's why I've been very active in going out to acquire, because they're going to need that. At the same time, they encouraged healthcare, anyone in the supply chain of healthcare to go in China to make investments, because they need that huge market for it. Now, of course, even the one-child policy being abolished, now people have two, it's a mixed feeling. Now, if you ask the one-child kid, can mommy, daddy have another child, a boy, a sister, or a brother, of course the child will say no, obviously, because they've been spoiled, all the tensions in that child. If that child's smart enough, will obviously say no. But those population in the cities is more well-cared, really pretty much spoiled. But remember, those are smaller percentage of the entire 1.36 population, billions of population. The huge population in rural cities are farmers, are outside of the Costco city. They're gonna need people. They're gonna need more children. 2 is still not enough. If they could, they want to have many. This is gonna help with the workforce. They're gonna need them to farm on the land. They're gonna need to make a living. So those population huge. It's predominantly is the population in China, and they're gonna have no problem having second and more. Now, of course, it takes time for them to grow up to become, in the workforce. But China have estimated this is the right time to relax the policy so that they can start having child and then and children and then enter into the workforce by the age of 18, 19, 20.
So thinking about investment and business in Brazil, the gentleman said that in India, one of these steps to work against corruption and a very manual process was more centralized government. So in light of the corruption recently in Brazil, in those instances, is there any news about streamlining the government? For example, for customs purposes, we have ongoing challenges of just the very, very bureaucratic nature of a permit, a license, and has to go to the next office, and for an American organization doing business in Brazil, it's very difficult to guarantee, for example, production. They get key raw materials in. There's always a new regulation about a specific sector. So is there any way or any thought of any kind of streamlining of customs procedures or any other organizations, such as in the U.S., we're focusing more on now a central window in October of this year, where the EPA, the FDA, customs are now pooling information that an importer would need. Is there any thought of that in Brazil that's been perhaps talked of in the near future, or is that still a world away?
Well, I would say that most of the customs work is centralized with the IRS. They do the customs, but they don't do the license or the authorizations to import. Those are different agencies. And I would say that it's going to take a while for those agencies to start talking between each other. But the part of the IRS to go through customs clearance, once you have all the paperwork, that's all electronic. So you don't have to deal with an agent or an auditor, a tax auditor. But to get those licenses, the approval to import into Brazil is still, you need, depending on the business. Some business you don't need specific license, so it's pretty easy to import. But the others, when you need...
Unfortunately, fall into other.
Yeah, so if you need those licenses, it's going to take a while to have a centralized communication internally. I'm sorry.
Okay. We had a question here, and then we'll go back there.
I've got a question, because one of the common themes I'm hearing is public debt. What is the impact that on growth in the big countries? Unless you're Russian, it's just the big countries. But, I think I heard was China's debt 300% of GDP.
In the third quarter, I think, I saw one report where it's 250%, but I think overall you said it was closer to maybe 50% of GDP?
Well,
Right.
where
It
do you
depends-
see a healthy public debt to GDP and growth?
How much time do we have?
What I really want to know, do I need to take my retirement portfolio and bury it in my backyard?
Don't go to China.
Okay.
If you are betting on your retirement money and thinking about going to China stock market to play around, this is not the time. You rather go somewhere else.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that
But-
inside information?
I tell you, the individuals, if you look at the TVs, the televisions everywhere in the world, you know, the most burned at the moment due to the stock market crisis in China are those elderlies. They put up their saving, the lifetime saving into stock market, follow the big stocks, right? You know, big companies, buy and sell, without knowing what they're getting themselves into. Now the market has been crashing down for how many days? So they are the one hit the most.
I'll try to make it short and sweet and relevant. You said China's switching from a production economy to a consumption economy. It took us here about 80 years to develop the middle class that we have. So everything grew organically. So now China went in 10 years to a huge middle class. A lot of purchasing power, but from what I understand, not a lot of consumer products out there. So if I wanted to export to China, let's say food, apparel, health and beauty, what are some of the things that make sense for us here to bring to China for the middle class consumer?
All of the above. You know why? China.
How easy would it be? What are some of the, quickly, 2 seconds, what are the steps to take? Because we do have a here. And
2 steps. Call me.
What is your hourly rate?
Huh?
What is your hourly rate? That's what I thought.
Dan will negotiate with you. He's my agent.
I'll just talk to you.
Now, quickly. I know you need to go to sleep. I do too. When you go to China, you really need to understand your products. Would this be interested by the Chinese population, and which group, which market? You gotta really do your homework. Without that, there's no next step. Assumably, China, like Shanghai, will love your food because it's very healthy. That nowhere else is being sold in China. So you are the first batch of group of company going to China to sell these products. So you need to know, okay, if I'm going to sell that, you want to set a company in China. Setting a company could be a retail company, could be a trading company, could be a service company, depending on where they want to partner with a third party, like a distributor in a supply chain. So all of that. And then you have to have your own people. Don't just set up your shop there and then say, hire a bunch of excellent talents in China market and run with it. You're going to set for failure. You need to have your ears and eyes on the ground. So that means you have to have your own people on the ground, managed until you feel that, the China investment being so self-sufficient, really doing very well on their own, then you perhaps you repatriate that individual. Otherwise, you got to have your people there. So that's 2 minutes.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question. You're the lucky one.
I have the question that would relate to two experts from two different countries, but because I love Shanghai noodles, I will start from China. What are the prospects for the VAT tax nationwide implemented? And that's the same question to the India. I've heard from my colleagues that Moody's are kind of one-man army. So what are the prospects to how quickly the VAT could be implemented in the whole country nationwide?
The transformation have started 3 years ago. It's almost completed. Only the insurance industry is not getting the VAT. Basically, very soon. I think that will be next year or two will be fully transformed. Only VAT world, no business tax. So there's no duplication of tax in the near future. That's the goal that China has set for.
Okay.
In India, I think the goal right now is for the end of the next fiscal year, but practically, I just don't think that's going to happen. It's a goal that has been set, but I think there are several procedures that need to be done to establish that. We've had this history where we try to draft a companies law, which was very archaic. It was a mid-1950s law. I think it took about a little over 4 years to come up with something in 2003. So I would say there is an intention, a definite intention, because there's an urgency that is felt with several initiatives that are in place, and I think this will be one of the largest hurdles. So it should happen. I don't see it happening in a year, though.
So 2-3 years?
I would think so. Yeah. I hope so too.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We'll probably stay around for a couple of minutes if there's anybody that has a burning question that would like to come up. Our panelists would like to thank you for the weather that they enjoyed when they arrived here in Kansas. And I told them it's supposed to be even better tomorrow. They're all flying back to the Northeast tomorrow where the nor'easter may or may not hit. So you're welcome to stay in Kansas and continue to enjoy our hospitality. But I really want to thank you all for making the trip here and sharing with us your insight and expertise. So thank you very much.
On the Global Economic Outlook, the 15th annual event sponsored by Grant Thornton. That's your company.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Ms. Ansha, this is a token for us. Remember us, you did an excellent job. Please come back. Guy is going to be.
Just one more thing. On your table is our International Business Excellence Award. This is something else that our Grant Thornton sponsors every year. So if there's anybody that you would like to recommend, please fill it in and leave it at the table. Did I get it, Kim?
Thank you. Thank you very much, all the panelists and moderator. Dan, thank you very much for 15th annual sponsored event. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your gracious presence. The next program is something that all of you want. Oh, by the way, I want to ask you something. If we were to organize a panel of this nature, which is unique, which is very important, very timely, and then you can get into nuts and bolts too. Is that right? You said how many minutes do I have? So how many of you will attend a full day conference on the subject of country focus? How many of you will attend? Raise your hand high. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. About 20 out of 180, 160 people. That's how it is. Okay, Dan, I was just going to do some market research for you.